Okay, welcome everybody. Miles Kessler here, and today I am with Cheryl. Is it Whitelaw?
It's Whitelaw, yeah.
Whitelaw. I'm with Cheryl Whitelaw. Excuse me. I have a bit of a cold, so you're gonna have to forgive my raspy voice and the occasional cough. And Cheryl's agreed to do a meditation coaching demonstration as part of the series of sessions I'm doing with a lot of people. And first, what I'll do, Cheryl, is I'll read the answers that you gave, and then if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, that'd be great. So you said that you have been practicing meditation on your own for some time, but with no formal study with a teacher. You have some experience with Shizen Young's method. That's great. And for the last 2 years following John, is it Bernie?
Bernie, yeah, that's right.
John Bernie. Okay, I want you to tell me a little bit about that afterwards because I'm not familiar with him. Pardon me. And in terms of your daily practice, you practice 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. You started back in 2011. That's pretty good. And you have reduced daily meditation, taking Feldenkrais practitioner training, so doing a similar frequency of awareness through movement practice, which is an aspect of Feldenkrais. As far as retreat experience, you said that you do self retreats for 2 days, 2 times a year, and that you also do Tai Chi retreats. And last year, a 7-day silent retreat with John Bernie. So, could you elaborate a little bit on that, and certainly tell me about John Bernie and what he's doing?
Yeah. So, John, I think, to kind of place him a bit in lineage, I know he studied for a while with John Klein, and that he certainly he's done a lot of I would say body work with folks. I think zero balancing was one of the modalities.
Okay.
And got into meditation training a little bit more just like how to do it, how to settle in the body. Mm-hmm. But I think at the urging of teachers like Adyashanti, was sort of urged to step more fully into that, into being more of a mindfulness or spiritual teacher.
Mm-hmm. Practice. Okay.
So has, been doing that for a little bit.
Now, you said you had no formal training with a teacher, but it sounds like you have had something with John.
I've had exposure. Like my challenge is that locally I've tried to look at, meditation communities and just have struggled a little bit coming from, I'm an integral coach. Mm-hmm. And so it's right. A little hard to fit into communities that are a little more, amber or orange level based. And I've
tell me about it.
Yeah.
I feel your pain, sister.
Yeah. So
it's not really pain. It's just, it is what it is. That's just how it is. Yeah. So we meet however we can.
Yeah. I mean, to say I've had no formal training perhaps is a little harsh, but in the sense of like an ongoing teacher. And, I was introduced to Shizen Young's method through a fellow coach who had trained with him for years. Mm-hmm. And did her own kind of book to, like, Meg Salter's her name, but her own kind of helping people to access some of his method. And so I've done some work with her. Okay. But those are, when I think about meditation as, it's the repetition daily or the regular that's part of the gold, I think. So having a little shot here, a little shot there of instruction to me isn't quite the same.
Right. Yeah. So why don't you tell me about your daily practice? So when you sit down to meditate, I want to try to get a picture of what's going on inside your meditative mind. So I assume it's somehow a mindfulness-based practice or awareness-based practice.
Yeah. I mean, the practice that I've done most recently, is coming from part of what Shizen Young offers. And so the idea of you could choose focus inwards or focus outwards.
Outwards meaning like on sounds or visual.
Yeah, he being a very lower right gentleman, he delineates, it could be hearing, it could be seeing, it could be sense perception. And so that's been one of the more common ways that I sort of settle in, to let my body quiet down, to sort of come into a quiet state. After that, though, I primarily focus on breath.
Okay, so you start with just kind of a little bit of choiceless awareness on the senses
Mm-hmm.
and the sensual experience, what's happening in sights and sounds and smells and touch,
Yeah.
etc. And
Yeah.
then as you settle in, you shift to the breath.
Yeah. And I would sort of say, the first 5 to 10 minutes, sometimes longer depending on the day, but that transition into more stillness, and a more inward quality. What happens from there, if it's calm, if there's not much going on, then like I would say I just sit.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't focus
Yeah,
on too much of anything.
great. Okay, so before we go a little bit more into that, maybe you can tell me what you hope to get from this session today.
Well, I think part of I was intrigued about it. Um, I've had a love-hate relationship with meditation. Like prior to starting, I had a good 10 years of starting and stopping in various different ways. So I don't tend to count that because it was so spotty.
Mm-hmm.
But I've, because of the nature of my study and awareness through movement practice, it's somewhat substituted for meditation for me in the last few months, just from a time basis.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to rejump my meditation practice because I'm the kind of interior quiet and I would say just the equanimity and calm that I've known through meditation, as I am learning now to do functional integration, which is the other part of the Feldenkrais modality. Inner structure is wonderful, but the equanimity that comes with that, I can see that continuing my practice will increase how effective I am with people.
Okay. All right. So let's get down to some nuts and bolts then. And I'd like to actually kind of get a good idea of what's going on. So you start with a bit of a scan. Sorry, not a scan. Choiceless awareness of the senses. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then at some point you shift into the breath.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was just sitting.
Yeah.
So let's start with the shift into the breath. When you shift into the breath, what exactly are you observing?
Well,
like phenomenologically. You can talk about the parts of the body, but
yeah.
If you could explain phenomenologically what's happening.
Yeah, well, it's part of it is in working with John at the retreat last year,
Mm-hmm.
he connected me with a particular way of creating space and expanding downward. I would say, hara based, to really open up it's always felt to me like an awareness threshold, because past there, it's much more unified, it's much calmer, and the paradoxical words, emptier and fuller, and so
and you experience crossing this threshold from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, where John was really helpful to me last year in the retreat, because he would work with people one-on-one as part of sessions, was how to connect more reliably with that inner spaciousness, that inner quality, and using a bit of a focus of sort of, it's like an internal dropping in the area that I associate with the hara, down, that seems to open that up within me more reliably.
And this internal space that you're talking about, it was the same experience that you were talking about before when you said just sitting.
Yeah, what I would say is it doesn't I don't necessarily connect with it every time I sit.
Okay, that's normal.
Yeah, but yeah, once I sort of feel like that's open, then I guess I feel like there's nothing left to do except.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go from putting awareness on the senses to the breath, to that shift that you are crossing the threshold that you're talking about. Excuse me. Our whole family is a little sick.
Oh,
So
no.
yeah. When you shift to the breath, it's an intentional thing. You'll notice, okay,
Yeah.
you sit down for a few minutes or moments or whatever it is, and then you shift to the breath.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly or precisely are you observing? What physical sensations or what experiences are you observing on the breath?
So I would say a sense of just the cycle of the expansion and release of the breath.
Okay. Which part in the body? Belly, hara, chest.
Yeah, when I don't have killer allergies and sinus and stuff in the morning, that I would say fairly fulsome, just
Mhm.
because I mean one of the benefits of doing regular awareness through movement is there's several breath lessons that help open up sort of the full cylinder, as it were, of
When you
breathing.
say breath lessons, are you talking about breath exercises, breathing exercises?
Yeah, Feldenkrais wrote several awareness through movement lessons for breath, and coming from a judo background, they've some of them I could say are more in a biomechanical, just opening up
Mm-hmm.
the area of the ribs and opening up the area, but some of them start to get a bit esoteric in
And you do
spaciousness
this,
in the pelvic bowl. Yeah.
what in the pelvic bowl?
Oh, just the spaciousness in the bowl of the pelvis, and
Okay, okay.
in relating to what's described as Dantian or Hara
Mm-hmm.
as an element of coordination and function as
And
well.
yeah, I'm just so what I want to know is with these breathing exercises, that's my words. I don't think you quite said that, but
Mhm.
with the breathing exercises, do you use those in the meditation sometimes?
No, I would say
Right.
that the byproduct of doing them is that I'm feeling fairly fulsomely connected with my whole sort of torso
Okay.
as I breathe. And occasionally, um, some of the Tai Chi training I've done, it feels more like whole body breathing.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't actively try to engage those as techniques, but I notice the effects come on sometimes.
Well, I'll just say just as a side note here is that it's okay to engage those as techniques if you feel like, let's say, if you feel the mind is a little restless one day or it's a bit scattered, you're not settling down. Excuse me. Then breathing techniques can be good, but remember, breathing techniques are not mindful. I mean, you can do breathing techniques mindfully,
Yeah.
but the breath will change according to the inner path. So as you shift through states or cross thresholds, as you said, the
Mhm.
breath will qualitatively change.
Mhm.
Sometimes the breath will become more contracted as development, as progress, as I'm sure you understand. And sometimes it'll become more expansive and more free. And the thing is, so if you use your breathing exercise in the meditation, I would use them just as a way to focus and anchor,
Mhm.
and then let them go, and then go back into the natural movement of the breath.
Right.
So, could you describe to me um, a few of the qualities or sensations that you experience on the in breath only?
Um, so, a sense of feeling the air coming in through the nostrils and
Mm-hmm.
through the windpipe. Um, a sense of expanding out and down.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which way out?
like
We have a body like this, so
expansion
yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, forward and sides and back in
Okay.
terms
Okay.
of myself. Yeah, like
So,
a sense of ribs opening, but
mhm.
in all directions.
Great.
Yeah, and I guess I would say there's this felt sense internally of like a little drop into my lower abdomen. So
Can you describe that?
that in a physical term, perhaps like the sense that the pubic bone would slide forward and down just a little bit in response to the expansion.
And what would happen to the spine when you would experience that?
Generally it lengthens. Like I
Naturally.
Mhm.
Well, that's actually a good sign. Okay. And this tilting pelvic bone forward and down, is that something you do, or is it something that just happens?
No, sorry, and I'm using sort of like body landmarks as I would
No, that's okay.
recollect, but you know, what I've noticed since my last Feldenkrais training, we did a lesson, a breathing lesson that really opened up like sort of the bowl of the pelvis
Mm-hmm.
more than I had the experience of.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm noticing now is, and probably it's just a bigger fullness of intake of air, is that tends to have a little bit of natural movement now,
Right.
whereas before breathing probably was a, kind of you breathe sort of thing, but there's just wasn't the elasticity. There wasn't the fullness of that in intake happening. And so as you're asking, like, what do I sense? That's part of what I'm sensing now is sort of it opens and I feel taller as that.
Yeah, so this opening, rotating of the pelvis, and lengthening of the spine, it's a good sign of, you can, once in one way you could say you're also crossing a threshold there. It's kind of a state shift. It's one of the things that happen in the state shift. But it's also important to understand that a state shift can also, depending on the state or the stage that you're at in the stages, it could have the opposite. It could be a downward descending energy as well. That kind of gets a bit heavy. So just take care, because there's a very clear, excuse me. Let's say when we're sitting, we're just kind of getting it all together at the beginning. That has one feeling. And then this lifting of the spine has another feeling, and it feels better. It's kind of a nicer feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Just pay attention to the tendency to have a preference in your mind for that,
Okay.
because that will come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it sounds like it comes relatively quick, maybe not all the time, but it comes. And
Mm-hmm.
that's good. That's clearly a shift in the state. But also pay attention if it does something different, and take care not to manipulate or try to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have expectations, it'll probably stop
Yeah.
it. Couple of questions about the breath. This specific breath you're speaking about, even though I know it's there sometimes, it's not always there, but would you say it's a long breath or a short breath?
Yeah,
Or medium?
fairly long breath. I would say when I've kind of more into it and sort of starting to let it go, there is a sense of, and again, one of the terms I was introduced by, it was actually working with Paul Linden, and he, had a practice in his training about embryonic breath. So the sense that I'm not so much breathing as there's just breath that happens.
Okay,
And
so
so that,
breathing without the breather.
yeah,
Something like that. Is that what you're referring to?
yeah. That um, the just because I'm developing a fair sensitivity to what's happening in my body during various processes, the effort seems to really fall away, and so the inflation and deflation, of the lungs, just has its own
Great.
rhythm,
And as you go more and more into the subtlety, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing that in a way agency is kind of relaxing.
Yeah.
And you're entering a bit more into a flow of the experience.
Yes.
Great. Can you tell me about the out breath?
I was thinking about that. Yeah, that it feels sort of just like a natural sort of, for certain, like my belly just sort of, comes back in towards my spine and up to my rib cage, that it feels like just a release of whatever that elasticity happened, that there's a natural limit, and then it retreats back to
Correct. Yeah.
empty.
And
Yeah.
is it a long, medium, or short?
Um, it tends to be a bit longer than my in breath,
Okay.
especially at the beginning, mostly because I always come to my cushion with morning congestion, just allergy.
Okay. Yeah, sure, sure.
So yeah, that probably evens out over the 30 minutes, but yeah.
Fast, medium, or slow?
I would say medium to slow. Yep.
Medium to slow. Okay, but probably at the beginning it's a little bit quicker and shorter, and then
Yeah.
as you go into the practice, it extends a little bit. Okay. And would you say it's smooth? Also for the in-breath, by the way, but is it smooth or
Yeah. Yeah.
rough in some way?
It's pretty smooth.
Hmm.
Yeah. That yeah, if we'd had this conversation a year ago, I would have said it was much more, it had different, there was clear starts and then a clear, harder finish,
Hmm.
um, just because of the breathing habits that I had fallen into. But
Now, when you say smooth, it's like, smooth as butter smooth, but is there any vibration in there, or is there any other, I don't know, parts or?
yeah, in terms of a more subtle sense,
Hmm.
what I tend to notice when it comes to this more like just the natural flow, I get really conscious of a kind of buzziness in my spine,
You
um,
do.
and that there's as if there's like a little track that it when it fills out and then it retreats.
That would be more
It's a very subtle little feeling, but
like the chi moving or energy or vibrations.
yeah, yeah.
And do you ever focus on it? Do you ever like just put your awareness on
And
it?
I would say after following Shinzen thing, I notice it because it shows up, but then
Mhm.
I let that go. Like it's not something I tend to fixate on if I notice it happening. It's just
Okay. All right. So you settle in on the breath. This sounds wonderful. The way you're describing the breath shows that you're experiencing a lot. Usually we experience a lot that, at the leading edge of our experience, it's always it's a clear experience, but it's difficult to articulate.
right.
That's
Yeah.
why that's why interviews are very important, because my job is to ask you all these questions and get you to.
Mhm.
The more you articulate it, when you go back and look, it's just going to be more. It's going to be more. You remember the old book Highlights from I don't know if you had any kids,
Yeah.
right? You go to the dentist as a kid, and they had these highlight magazines,
Mhm.
and there was one page in there that had a picture of a forest or something, black and white drawing, and there would be a boot hidden in the tree. There was these objects hidden in the forest,
Mhm.
and you had to find them. A
Right.
boot and a frying pan and stuff that kids would. And I always wanted to play that work that puzzle, but I was always a bit disappointed when I'd go in. They were already circled. Somebody would circle them.
Yeah.
So in a way, what we're doing now is like it's like circling. At the beginning, you don't see the boots on the bridge somewhere. You just can't see it. But then once you start to get it and you draw a circle around it, it's like, you can't miss it at that point.
Yeah.
So in a way, the more I ask you about these kind of subtle experiences, especially the subtle experiences, next time you sit down to meditate, you'll kind of go into that leading edge rather quickly.
Okay.
So you've got this experience of the breath, and then you at some point shift to more of a just sitting, choiceless awareness, crossing the threshold.
Mhm.
Can you tell me about that process from the breath to that?
Mhm. And sorry, I just have a tabby cat having a little fit on the table.
Actually, I'm used to cats.
Okay. Yeah,
They're on Zoom all the
for some
time.
reason she's racing around behind my laptop I've got it on my Feldenkrais table. So anyway,
No problem.
I was a bit concerned it was about to fly off.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I guess when I think about that moment, there's a couple things I think that happen. Um, One is, um, I would guess before the threshold, I have a sense of myself on the inside and a sense of myself on the outside. And after the threshold, that distinction doesn't seem to make a difference. That
Okay.
the
Mhm.
outside and the inside are undifferentiated.
And there's a clear crossing of the threshold, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
A
I think,
shift, a state shift or something.
yeah,
What
yeah.
precisely are you observing I'm sure it's not always the same thing, but can you give me an example of what precisely you're observing before the shift?
Oh, I think that I've often noticed, like I get a little warm. It's like as if the cheese started to um, run a little differently. Um, just because there's a sort of sense of often warmth and like any little, just because I do train Aikido, like rarely do I have no aches in the morning.
Sure.
So it's like someone just turns that down, the volume goes down on
Okay.
any kind of little aches or pains I
That's
have.
a good sign. Yeah.
Um, and there's this sense of, and this has happened to me a little bit just out in the world in the last year or so, like the sense that it's really big inside my eyes, like behind my eyes gets big. And I know myself, but I also know that I'm like, it's more than myself.
Would you call that a physical experience or a mental experience?
Um, it's what when I've noticed it, like, because I have it driving most often. Like we have very wide skies here, so you can drive on the
Oh,
road,
okay. Uh-huh.
and it doesn't feel like a mental experience in the sense of I'm not thinking about very much. Like it's pretty quiet on the inside.
Is it the mind or the body, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Not necessarily mental activity, but would you
Oh,
say
okay.
physical or non-physical, material or immaterial?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it has the quality of awareness, not of body.
Yeah, and the breath that you were describing of the tilting of the pelvis, physical or
Mhm.
mental? Would that be physical or mental?
Oh, yeah. It's physical. Yeah. In
Uh-huh.
the tilting. Yeah. The pelvis is a
The
physical.
lifting of the spine, this kind of natural lifting of the spine, physical or mental? Physical
Physical.
or
Yeah.
non-physical?
Yeah.
Right, good. And you said there was some vibration in the spine and the back?
Yeah. Well,
Little buzz, I think you said.
yeah, just the closer I am in that or to that state, I guess I've been here feeling a sense of like I can feel my bones and their energy or something. Like the closest word is it's this funny little buzziness that
Yeah. And would that buzziness be physical or non-physical?
mm, I think there's a physical basis because
What is
it
that?
seems to
What is it?
track where my bones are,
Okay.
but
And what,
I'm not sure that I would call it a physical experience.
okay. So there's a physical part of it where your
Yeah.
bones are, and maybe the lifting of the body, and you might feel the stretch or something.
Yeah.
Or if you had Aikido, a little pain in the body or something like that. But then there's also an energetic or non-physical aspect.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just feels like, I was having we've done a lot of work with the top of our femur head. So I've been experiencing the sense of really feeling where that is,
Yeah, wow, that's
but
cool.
through the buzziness, not through the
Hmm.
bone.
Okay, and let me go back to the question I asked you just a few minutes ago about before you cross the threshold, an example of what you're precisely observing. Because you said something about shifting into this lot of space on the inside, but
Mhm.
I got a sense that that was after the shift.
Yeah, probably. So just, yeah, coming up into it.
What's the cause and effect?
Yeah.
Not that you can make it happen. Don't get the wrong idea.
No, no, no. Yeah. I mean, just like my Aikido, the really good,
Sure.
I try to make that happen every time, but that's
Yeah,
not,
sure. Yeah, it doesn't happen until you give up.
and then it happens and it's a surprise.
Right.
Um, yeah, maybe before, if I'm feeling into that, there's a sense, and I would say this is in the area of awareness rather than physical, like a sense of dropping away or a sense of
Yeah. Okay. So what I want to know is what are you observing when that sense arises?
yeah.
not to cut you off, because I understand what you mean by that, but
Yeah.
when that
No,
happens, for me, that's the beginning of the crossing or shift change.
mhm.
What are you observing when that happens? I don't know is also a valid answer.
Yeah, I don't know if I can accurately
Hmm.
speak to, like, I think I notice it when I'm there, not
Hmm.
when it's coming.
Hmm.
Like I don't think I would know what the roadsides are
Okay.
other than a certain interior quiet
Okay. Okay.
and a
And
certain um, like I would say, the kind of preambles about the settling of body, settling of mind,
mhm.
settling awareness.
The
Uh,
shifting of the pelvis forward, the lifting of the spine,
yeah, like
the
the
breath becomes more smooth and
yeah.
a little longer. The out breath is also a little bit longer than the in breath. These are
Mhm.
some of the qualities that are prior to that shift, crossing the
Yeah,
threshold.
but yeah, that's I don't know if I can say something,
Right.
just before.
Perfect. That's
Yeah.
perfect. So that's actually where we're at. So you actually, so to help you fine tune your practice, I'm going to prescribe
Hmm.
some things for you here because it's very clear what you're saying and it's you're articulating it really nicely. There's a few gaps. You as you move through this. I mean, I'm calling it more of a mindfulness. At least what you described to me there was a more of a mindfulness
Yeah.
based meditation. I think when you shift, if you shift into more of a non-dual practice, you can have a slightly different experience. No more, no less. I mean, it's equally as valid and important, in fact. But when you have that witnessing, that's the part of the self that witnesses. It's witnessing without the witness. When the witness disappears, agency without the agent. What did you say? Breathing without the breather. This type of, as you shift into that place, there still is a duality because that's what mindfulness is, a dualistic practice.
Mhm.
There's a part of the mind that can observe things that are arising in experience, and at best, it's just a pure witness. So from now at a certain point, you can. I think when you say you drop into just sitting, then that pure witness probably relaxes and you may be more expansive. But on the way to that, it's very good. So you said you started by kind of anchoring in the senses,
Mhm.
maybe sounds or things like that. Perfect. You have your anchor points. Excuse me. That settles things in. Then as it settles, you come to the breath. Now, the reason I asked you about physical and mental is because you should be able to see relatively easy from what you've described. You should be able to tell if something's physical or mental. Mental, certainly in the Buddhist, uh, let's say, phenomenology,
Mhm.
all experience is either physical or mental. So when we say energy, it's more of a mental thing. And
Mhm.
it doesn't really matter if that word works for you or not, but there's certainly material and immaterial. So you should be able to discern easily. And it can be very helpful for you, not in an analytical way, occasionally reflecting, but it can be very helpful for you to know, because mindfulness has a cognition to it. There's a knowing to it. Know what's physical and what's mental. Once, and you already do that, but I asked some questions where it was a little bit kind of both. You weren't sure, and then I asked more, and you said, well, there's an aspect of it that's physical and an aspect of it that's energy or whatever it was. So yeah, find that line between what's physical and what's energy. And again, not an analysis, occasionally doing that's not a problem at all, but more of a synthesis that you just by contemplating it, observing it again and again, that knowledge will arise.
Mhm.
Excuse me, Cheryl. It's kind of like looking into a dark room. You look in and say, "What's there?" And nothing, because it's like pitch black. Nothing. Oh, it's okay. Wait, look again. Well, it's not nothing. It's pitch black. Okay, so keep looking, and as your eyes adjust, you say, "Well, it's kind of gray. There's something over there, and there's something here."
Mhm.
After 10 minutes of adjusting to the light, you can see, oh yeah, well, there's a sofa there and there's a piano over there. You start to discern what's actually there. It's the same
Mhm.
thing in meditation, and it can be the breath, it can be the mind. It doesn't really matter what you're observing in that case. So knowing the distinction between physical and mental, and then you'll begin to see connections. So, for example, you're watching the breath, and at some point the pelvis rotates and the spine lengthens. But what caused that? Well, obviously a state shift caused that. But the moment before that, most likely the mental factors of energetic effort, mindfulness, and concentration came together. We're able to stay with an experience, a breath or whatever it was, a thought. We're able to stay with the experience long enough, a few seconds enough, to shift you into a deeper state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, when you become, the reason I ask these questions, what happened before is so you can start to be aware of that process. You, like I said before, you can't make that process happen, but that process will begin to happen and you'll see it. So you'll realize, for a moment, I was like really close with the breath all the way to the end. And then the in breath was all the way to the end. And then suddenly my body shifted automatically. So you'll see that cause and effect. And you'll begin to see the cause and effect of when, it sounds like intuitively you go into more of a kind of a just sitting, this space, this big mind in a way that you'd mentioned. This sounds like more of an intuitive shift, but from asking you, you're not quite clear about what causes the intuitive shift. Or what was happening, I should say, just before the intuitive shift. And it's like this. Imagine this is an orange, but imagine it's a lemon, a nice ripe, fresh yellow lemon, and we cut it in half. And you take the lemon, you squeeze all the juice, like it's full of juice. You squeeze all the juice out of the lemon. What's happening in your mouth right now?
Right.
Yeah, there's water in your mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Is the water the saliva? Is it physical or mental?
Yeah, I mean, it's a physical effect, but of a mental,
And
my
it
imagining that juicy orange.
perfect. Exactly. So the saliva is physical. The lemon was mental because it was an imaginary lemon. Did the saliva cause the lemon?
Did the saliva, sorry, the
Did,
saliva cause?
did the saliva cause the lemon,
Oh, okay.
or did the lemon cause the saliva?
Yeah, that's right. The lemon caused the saliva.
Right. So it's a very simplistic example, but you should be able to see this a lot in your practice. You're already in kind of a flow state. Sometimes you'll start to see the moment by moment cause and effect of everything.
Okay.
And then if you shift out of the witness, then everything changes. But as long as there's a witness, you'll see the moment by moment cause and effect. So seeing that and knowing that more will actually help you ground your practice more. And then from that, then you'll start to be able to see pure process, which means that you'll see the beginning, the middle, and the end of experience. The easiest way to see that is like with the breath. You stay with the breath from the beginning through the middle to the end and all the way to the end. The way a car stops at a stop sign. There's many different ways it can stop at a stop sign. So you follow the breath all the way till it stops. There may be a pause, there may not be a pause, but if there's a pause, you know the quality of the stop, you know the quality of the pause, you know the quality of the return breath or the out breath, and you know the quality of how that out breath moves all the way to the end. And again, the stop and the pause, etc. That's kind of process-oriented consciousness. You already, much of what you described was already, excuse me, was already process-oriented consciousness. So these things are these state. That's kind of your inward path. But wow. But the more precise you can get with just understanding physical and mental, discerning, I should say, physical and mental, and you can do it. It's easy. And also the cause and effect, just seeing how the cause and effect happens, and then process-oriented consciousness. Then once you kind of anchor there, you'll start to see these interesting shifts. And you can do one of two things. You can do what you do, which is you go kind of to just sitting. And I don't know if it's fair to say big mind, but it's kind of space behind.
Yeah.
Definitely do that. It sounds a little bit more like a non-dual practice, but that's totally, that's cool. The other thing you could do is you could focus in. So instead of opening up, you can focus in. Now, since opening up is kind of your go-to, keep doing that because it's obviously working. But occasionally, maybe one sitting a week or for 5 minutes during the sitting, go back to the breath and not the whole breath here, but focus on just the abdomen or the just above the navel or where it is, and follow precisely the movement and all the physical sensations that are in the movement of the in breath and all the physical sensations that are in the movement of the out breath.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll start to see some interesting things. Because when we have an experience in one area, like let's say this open crossing threshold, phenomenologically, that same phenomena will arise in anything that you focus on.
Right.
So it could be a knee pain, for example, or it could be a thought coming up, or it could be just the breath. But it will be slightly different according to the object, in this case, the breath. But phenomenologically, it'll be the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say too much more beyond that. And
Yeah.
but it
No,
sounds fantastic.
that makes sense. I mean, it's recalling the last Tai Chi class I went to and working with a very specific internal focus of dropping as the engine for movement. And that was, I think, I had a good example of, it was a very particular focus, through the set, but it created this, I mean, they often use words like, sort of the sense of honey movement, or like that there was this being moved instead of moving.
So that's a state shift.
Yeah, totally. And
Right.
had it for a good part of the set, which was, pleasant, very much.
Fantastic. Well, great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds really. Yeah, I'm actually very happy to hear about your practice. It sounds good. Yeah, finding a group can be difficult, but we have the interwebs these days, and there's lots out there. But really, it comes down to your own practice, and if you can do retreats, well, however often you can do a retreat, that's great. And, I think twice a year you're doing some silent time. So
like I try to, like, between Christmas and New Year's, I'll get a couple days, and I, part meditation, and then I'd have this thing called truing the air, is sort of like the metaphor of truing the spokes, to kind of go through.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just to, because I've had a considerable amount of life revolution in the last few years, so it's really helpful to kind of ground that experience and in a way complete it before going on, and then try in the summer just to take advantage of it being not so dark and cold, and going out. Just being present sort of in nature more. And
all right, so let me just, before we finish off, let me just review what the kind of the what do you say, suggestions. And the suggestions I gave you are actually for three state stages. The first one is to recognize the distinction between mind and matter. The second one are physical and non-physical, which you can do easily now. There's certain, as you get more refined, you'll have to work a little bit more, but you can do it. And work is not really the right word. And number two is to begin to see the connections. Like the image of the lemon squeezing causes the water in the mouth. The water in their mouth causes you to spit or drink water or whatever it is. Yeah. So you said you have allergies. The itchiness or the stuffiness in the nose begins to make you want to sneeze or to blow your nose. The need to blow your nose causes you to reach for the tissue. So you'll be able to see this all the time. Your mind might not be in the conditions to see it all the time, but if you look in the right way, which it sounds like you know how to do that, you'll be able to see it. And that will just help you to drop into that next stage, which is the process-oriented consciousness, where you begin to see the beginning and the middle and all and the end of all experience. You might catch the mind thinking, but the moment you see you realize, oh, the mind's thinking, you become mindful of the thought, then you'll be able to stay with the thought, and you might even be able to stay with it until it disappears. So that type of refinement will be very good for you. And then there's further things that will begin to appear. But if you can ground yourself there,
great.
You're a very good foundation.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks very much. This was
absolutely, Cheryl. And
great.
it's
touch in. Yeah.
Great. I think I just missed what you last thing you said. Sorry.
Yeah, no, great to have the touch in, because it's this is what I'm aware of in practicing, not having the access to the refinement, and especially as things get increasingly more subtle,
Yeah.
You need to talk with someone who knows what that's about, you know, has
Totally.
the experience.
Right. Yeah. Well, fantastic. I'm happy that you took the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Can I ask you a quick question after I turn off the recording?
Sure.
Okay, good. So let me say goodbye and thank you for this session, and good luck with your practice.
Yeah, thanks, Miles.
All right, you're welcome. Bye.